Life in our country is so disappointing right now. 5 months into our current reality, and things seem to be getting harder, more distressing. And our distress seems to be moving us in different directions from each other, making divisions that already existed even sharper and deeper. What is faith supposed to look like at this point? In a time when it seems that as a nation, we're living in at least two different realities, at a time when the hostility and antipathy among us grow worse by the day, what does it mean to keep living by faith? When all our old familiar structures and systems and rhythms of community, worship, healing, learning have been suspended or changed, what is faith? And do we have enough? This morning, the Gospel of Matthew tells us an unusual story of faith. It begins with Jesus venturing from the familiar and welcoming territory of Galilee into the unfriendly, unclean territory of the Gentiles, Tyre and Sidon, Greek cities that were hostile to Jews. The Jews and the pagans had an antipathy and suspicion of each other that we can surely relate to in our own reality. The division ran deep. But even in this unwelcoming land, Jesus' reputation for compassion and healing precedes him. As soon as he arrives, a woman comes begging for help. Matthew doesn't tell us her name. He only tells us her nationality, Canaanite, a nationality associated with idolatry, with uncleanness. A pagan woman in a pagan land. We know nothing else about this woman except for this. She is a mother and she is desperate. Her little daughter is possessed by a demon, suffering, tormented, powerless to forces beyond her control. This is all we know about this woman, but it's everything, isn't it? Because we understand right away. We understand the desperation that comes from feeling powerless. We understand anguish and pain. We understand being at the mercies of forces beyond our control. We understand fearing for our children, fearing for the future. We also understand the hostilities that can happen between people who are living under two different perceptions of reality, as the Jews and the Gentiles did. We know how labels get lobbed from one side to the other, how a label is meant to erase everything else about who a person is. Canaanite. Perhaps under other circumstances, this woman would have avoided these men traveling from Galilee, but despair and fear will drive a person to do what they have to do, no matter what others say to them or about them. They will not let themselves be erased. So no sooner does Jesus arrive than the woman shows up to pursue him, shouting, screaming, howling her pain and her need. "Have mercy on me, Lord, Son of David. My daughter is tormented by a demon." And Jesus? He ignores her. He does not answer her at all. But she doesn't stop. She will not be stopped. She persists. She perseveres. She pursues him. And the men who follow Jesus cannot take it. They can't stand hearing her wail, and they beg Jesus to send her away. The desire to maintain a sense of calm and normalcy can be so strong that some people would rather silence expressions of pain than to listen and face the hurt and try to do something. No, send her away, they urged Jesus. And this time he answers, not her, but them. He says, I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Jesus knows his mission. He has embraced a purpose-driven life. He knows if you're going to be effective, you have to prioritize. You have to focus. You have to go deep. I was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He knows his target audience, and it is not this woman or her people. He came for the people of Israel, and he is not going to be pushed or guilted into letting his focus become fuzzy. But this woman is in too much pain to take no for an answer. She comes closer. She throws herself at his feet. She leans in. She kneels, she bows, she repeats herself. Lord, help me. This is a prayer, and it is sufficient. No high-flown words or pious posturing, just the simple, direct expression of need. Lord, help me. If in a time of despair you don't know how to pray, right here is all you really need to know. Lord, help me. Help me. The woman directs her need towards Jesus, and it should be enough, and yet Jesus just isn't very nice to her. He finally speaks directly to the woman, and what he says to her is, it is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs. Now that's just rude. Jesus is calling this woman a dog, and this is not a term of affection. This is an actual insult. Dog was a racial slur that Jews called Gentiles. Dogs were seen by the Jews of that time as scavengers who lurked around the edges trying to get what wasn't theirs. Jesus is telling this woman in no uncertain terms that he didn't come to help her or her people, and he uses really unpalatable language to get this across. And it is disconcerting to hear those words come out of Jesus' mouth. He sounds rude and harsh and abrupt, and we don't like it. And over the centuries, preachers and biblical scholars have tied themselves in knots trying to fix it for him, trying to make this interaction between Jesus and a needy woman ironic, or some kind of test, or some sort of joke. There's nothing in this story to indicate our irony or affection or humor. And when Jesus tested people, it was people in power, people who were smugly satisfied with their lock on the truth, not desperate people, not needy people seeking help and healing. To try to lay those things on this story when they really aren't there, it says more about us than it does about Jesus. Because in this story, Jesus isn't nice, y'all. He just isn't. This is not a nice story. And that's okay. Because there's a difference between nice and good. And in this story, Jesus is just not nice. Here's the plain truth. Jesus is not always who we like to think he is. He's not always who we want him to be. He will not be constrained by our categories of what we think a Savior, the Son of God, is supposed to be. We tend to assume that it's his divinity that's hard for us to believe, but this story reminds us that his humanity can make us pretty uncomfortable too. But the nameless woman begging at his feet is just too desperate to be uncomfortable, offended, affronted, hurt. She is too anguished to care about niceties. She doesn't need his politeness. She needs his power. She knows what she needs, and she's certain that Jesus is the one who can give it. So she goes after it, and she does not let go. There are plenty of people in the Bible who try to have an argument with Jesus. This woman shows us how to win one. Don't let your preconceptions about who he's supposed to be get in the way of encountering who he actually is. Do not defend yourself against whatever truth he would bring. And when you find him, do not let go, even if he disappoints you. This strong, pushy, desperate woman accepts the reality of her disappointment. Jesus has come for the children of Israel first of all, and this woman isn't going to try to change that fact. His first purpose is to bring healing and life and love to them. She accepts that reality, however disappointing it may be. But she shows us what to do once you have done the hard thing of saying yes to things to which you would rather say no. She says yes, but she pushes forward. She pushes further. She does what she can, not to change reality, but to expand its possibilities. Yes, Lord, she says. Yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. The woman accepts the reality of limitations, but she also believes in the reality, the bigger reality of plenty. She perceives that there is more than enough for everyone, and all she's asking for is a scrap of what Jesus has come to bring. The disciples, like most of us, lived by a sense of scarcity, arguing with each other over who would get to sit on Jesus' right and left, arguing with each other over who would be the greatest. When you believe in never enough, you focus on doing what it takes to get the little there is. The disciples persisted in this narrow sense of reality despite what they had already seen Jesus do. They didn't yet understand or believe that in God's economy, there is always enough. There is always more than enough. There is always plenty to share. Sometimes it takes an outsider to see the truth. This woman saw it. This woman understood that even leftovers could feed her need. She could see that in Jesus there was more than enough to heal her daughter. Yes, Lord. Yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. She takes his insulting words and transforms them from a vision of food tossed to dogs scavenging at a distance outside the house to the intimate picture of inside a home where the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from the table. And Jesus responds, "Woman, great is your faith. Let it be done for you as you wish." And her daughter is healed instantly. The woman wins the argument. More importantly, she gets what she needed, what she knew Jesus could give. Her daughter is healed. It is both astonishing and disconcerting that Jesus allowed himself to be pushed and persuaded by this woman. How could this woman have a bigger understanding of his mission than he did? Yet Jesus shows us his capacity to be challenged and to be changed. We see him allow his theology to be expanded. And what an amazing example. If Jesus could let his theology get bigger, why can't we? Why can't any of us? But it's disconcerting too. Just as it's hard to think of Jesus as not being nice, it's hard to think of him as needing to learn, to grow, or change. It's hard to believe that his theology would need to get bigger, because again, that's more human than we would like him to be. We tend to think of him as some kind of seer, someone who knew from the beginning all there was to know. But Luke, in his gospel, writes of Jesus as growing in wisdom as well as stature. And here, Matthew shows us what that might mean. Growing, learning, changing. It's all part of what it means to be fully human. And Jesus was not exempt from this just because he was also fully divine. He lets himself be changed by his encounter with this woman. But to me, the most captivating part of this story is not the fact that Jesus isn't nice or the fact that Jesus lets his theology expand and his mission grow. To me, the most captivating part is Jesus' final response to this desperate woman. Woman, great is your faith. This woman was not a disciple. She was not a Jew. She didn't make any kind of confession of faith. We don't see any kind of conversion or repentance or joining of the community that follows Jesus. She doesn't do any of the things we tend to think of as essential aspects of faith. What she does is this. She begs for help. She faces reality. She accepts disappointing answers. She dares to believe in the possibility of plenty. She pushes for more. In other words, she engages. She engages Jesus. She engages reality in all its pain and limitation and disappointment. And she engages an alternate vision of plenty, which then becomes the ground of her hope. The healing in this story, the thing all of us want, especially now, it almost seems incidental. It is the final fact of the story, a truth that once you read it almost seems like a given. Her daughter is healed instantly from a distance. Healing happens. It will happen. It is coming. With God, healing is inevitable. But the core of this story is not the healing, but the conversation, the engagement, the argument between Jesus and the woman. The center of this story shows us what Jesus means when he says, "Woman, great is your faith." Her faith was pursuing what she needed. Her faith was desperation. Her faith was persistence. Her faith was pushing back. Her faith was holding on. Her faith was daring to hope. Her faith was an argument. Life in our country is so disappointing right now. It's hard to believe that healing is inevitable. It's easy to despair. It's easy to let insults, offense, isolation, division, hostility, suspicion to be the overarching realities that define how we see and how we think and how we live. It's easy to live out of the pressing fear that scarcity is the only truth. It's easy to lose hope when God does not seem to act or answer the way we would like. Most of all, it's easy in the midst of all of this to feel like we don't have real faith. We don't have enough faith. You do have faith. If you are seeking God at all, you do have faith. It is faith enough for now. You have enough faith. You have enough. The healing itself is inevitable. And in time, with God, it will come. But for now, what matters is this. Hang on. Hang on. Engage however you can with your real life. Whatever the limitations, whatever your circumstances, engage with God, who is in all your limitations and circumstances. Argue with God if you need to. Tell God what your picture of plenty looks like. Beg for what you need. Demand what you need. Or just lay your soul at Jesus' feet and cry and howl and scream if that's what you need. Hound him. Dog him. Hang on to him. And don't let go.